Welcome to a new video and a new camera comparison. The Xperia 5 Mark IV against the Xperia 5 Mark II. What has changed in terms of cameras and what is new in terms of video quality? Let's check it out and let's get started. So let's check out the specs first of those two devices. We have a triple 12 megapixel setup on both, with the major difference being a 60mm lens telezoom on the 5 Mark IV, and on the 5 Mark II we have a 70mm zoom, so roughly 3 times and 2.5 times zoom, or 2.5 times on the 5 Mark IV and 3 times on the 5 Mark II. On the front we have a bigger change because we have here a 12 megapixel front-facing camera on the 5 Mark IV, where the 5 Mark II only has an 8 megapixel front-facing shooter. And I think we start off with the video of this front-facing shooter. So this is now the front-facing camera of the Xperia 5 Mark II, and I'm using the Photo Pro app in video mode. It doesn't come native here, so just to have something that can use my external microphone, otherwise it would be a little bit stupid. And this is the video performance. Sadly, 8 megapixels means we have only full HD recording here at 30 frames per second on the 5 Mark II, and on the 5 Mark IV we have a little bit more because we have there 4K, because we have 12 megapixel sensor there. And what do you think about the stabilization, about the colors, HDR a little bit, and so on? So write it down in the comments. And now I'm recording also with the Photo Pro app on the Xperia 5 Mark IV, because it has face detection at 4K and has the nice exposure on my face, which on the Video Pro app for some reason I don't have. But to make it fair and square, I wanted to compare this 12 megapixel 4K 30 frames per second 5 Mark IV against the 5 Mark II that only has full HD, to see which one is better in terms of HDR, color, stabilization, and so on. I think the clear winner here is the 5 Mark IV. What do you think about this one here in terms of cameras capability for video recording? What do you think? So, and now we are recording with the main camera of the Xperia 5 Mark II and the Video Pro app. Yes, another APK that I took from a newer Sony phone onto the 5 Mark II, and I did this already for the previous 5 Mark II camera review after I think it was 2 years already. So the 5 Mark II is really cool and still doing a good job, I would say, for what it is now. It is almost more than 2 years old right now. And what do you think about the main camera sensor here with the Video Pro app? 4K 30 frames per second, stabilization should be alright, as well as audio quality. I'm using my external microphone here. And what do you think about the picture quality, HDR, and so on? Do you see the clouds in the background there, or is it overblown? This would be very interesting to know. And sadly I don't have seamless zoom here, so I have to stop recording to switch to the other lenses. And now I'm at the ultra wide angle 16mm, and 16mm means not only ultra wide, but it has also very good HDR capabilities and would be the perfect vlogging camera, I would say, because you have enough stuff in the background that you can show eventually if you want to do some travel photography, vlogging or something like this. Very good ultra wide angle. Also in terms of stabilization it should work just fine. What do you think about this one here? And let's check out the roughly 3 times zoom. So here we can see the 2.9 times zoom, 70mm on the 5 Mark II, and I have the possibility to zoom in even further, just to 8.8 times. You can see the focus is struggling a bit and it's a little bit stuttery here, using the Photo Pro app in video mode, because the Video Pro app doesn't feature any stabilization for this one here, but I think it's still okay. What do you think? So, and now I'm using the main camera lens on the Xperia 5 Mark IV using an external microphone, and this is the stabilization that you can expect. These are the colors that you can expect. Let's check out HDR to compare it a little bit with the 5 Mark II. I think this might be even better because Sony has some better algorithms and newer sensors inside. And the cool new thing is I have also the ability to use seamless zoom, so I can zoom out to the 60mm ultra wide angle. This is now the 60mm 60mm ultra wide angle, perfect for vlogging still. I think it's the same sensor, maybe slightly upgraded sensor here on the 5 Mark IV. It has a little bit better HDR, high dynamic range, as you might see from here probably. And otherwise it's a very, very good sensor and good for vlogging especially. Now we go to the same position where I filmed the Cathedral of Cologne, from here exactly, to check out how good the zoom capabilities are. So I can do this live, go to the 60mm here directly, and as you can see here, works fine. If I want to, I can zoom even further in, and this is much more stable, as you can see here, and I can even zoom in a little bit further, 180mm, and it doesn't struggle with focusing as the 5 Mark II did, and in general I think it's a much cleaner shot here. So yeah, the zoom, telezoom is a bit better in terms of video on the 5 Mark IV. What do you think? The photos on the left, always the 5 Mark IV, on the right, always the 5 Mark II. We start off with the selfie cams, and of course, what we can see on first glance, it looks almost the same, not much of a difference, but when you zoom in, you can see the resolution change from 8 megapixels to 12 megapixels, more sharpness, more details on the 5 Mark IV for sure. Also, take a look at the background here, a little bit overexposed on the 5 Mark II, better HDR on the 5 Mark IV. In general, yes, the 5 Mark IV is better. It's not like groundbreaking, especially in those lighting conditions. In daylight conditions, probably it would be a little bit better. Let's take a look at some other shots. This is the ultra wide angle. We can see already ultra wide angle, better HDR, brighter picture, sharper picture, not so much pixelation as on the 5 Mark II. And yeah, the 5 Mark IV overall has the sharper, better ultra wide angle for sure. Also towards the edges where it's getting a bit softer on both. I think it's getting a lot more softer on the 5 Mark II, and you can see more artifacts here in the background that you don't see so much on the 5 Mark IV. When we check out the zoom shots, the Darth Vader shot, we can see a bit of a haze, bluish haze going on here on the 5 Mark II. Both purposely shot on 2.9 times. On the 5 Mark IV, it is a crop on the 2.5 times optical zoom to show you, yes, the sharpening algorithms that they use, and maybe also the lens sharpness in general is a bit sharper, so you get a little bit of more contrasty look. Not this haze that you have on the 5 Mark II, and a sharper look in general. So I think it is a better zoom lens slightly on the 5 Mark IV, but it depends on the situation, like you will see later on. What we can also see is on the 5 Mark IV, they're definitely using a different kind of lens. Same conditions here, and we have a brighter exposure on the 5 Mark IV, a bit darker exposure on the 5 Mark II. So there is almost no difference in terms of colors. We can take a look at here in the background. Yeah, there's a difference in terms of sharpness because I misfocus on the 5 Mark IV for some reason. The 5 Mark II it's super sharp, but in terms of colors, maybe a tiny hint warmer on the 5 Mark II, but this is negligible. Zoom lens again, and 2.9 times zoom against 2.5 times zoom. We have a lot of sharpening applied on the 5 Mark IV. Again, you can clearly see it in this example where there's not much of sharpening applied on the 5 Mark II. Look at the boat in the background, or the ship in the background. Can you read what's written there? Probably not. But here on the 5 Mark IV, where it's sharpening everything up, you can clearly read the boat's or ship's name, Escape, which is pretty interesting. Otherwise, yeah, in the background, you can see, yeah, we have sharpening as well, brighter picture, more contrasty kind of look on the 5 Mark IV, which makes everything looking a little bit better. Then on the 5 Mark II, warmer exposure, you can clearly see it here. This black here on this box of this sign is a lot warmer than this kind of bluish kind of sign. Also, I think a tiny bit, especially towards this, it was focusing, I think here and here, it was focusing probably towards the top end. You can see it is a bit less sharp here at the bottom especially, but we can see the sharpening applied to the main lens here as well on the 5 Mark IV. Here in the back, clearly where the 5 Mark II has everything nice bokeh, I would say already. So yeah, this is a difference here. Again, the ultra wide angle I think is better on the 5 Mark IV, also in HDR, especially where you can see the blue in the sky. This was taken with auto mode, and we have the overexposure on the 5 Mark II, but also the sharpness in the middle, towards the middle, the detail level is really one generation apart. I would not say 2 generations like it would indicate from 2.224, but 1 generation apart, where we have less details, more mushy details here on the 5 Mark II. Sharpening applied as well on the 5 Mark IV, but with the 12 megapixels you get more information just simply out of this shot. When we take a look at another shot, HDR, I was surprised getting this shot out of the 5 Mark IV because I was doing it manually and this was completely underexposed here, so the people were not really visible here, but it managed to do a good job with HDR, and I was exposing towards the sky to have all the cloud details in here. I was using the same exact setting on the 5 Mark IV, I was using the same settings on the 5 Mark IV on the 5 Mark II, and this is what I get. You can see overexposed is a slight hint that there's something going on with the clouds, but it's much darker in the foreground. Yes, you can raise it up, but raising all the shadows up in post, it's still not getting the blues back here. So yeah, the sensor might have the same size and same megapixels, but it's definitely a more capable sensor, especially when it comes to HDR. Not only processing, but also the sensor, I think, is doing a better job on the 5 Mark IV, the main sensor. Another zoom shot where we can see a clear difference in terms of color accuracy. The 5 Mark IV is more accurate. The warmer colors are the true colors of this gate, and it's not this cool bluish kind of tint that we see on the 5 Mark II. In terms of detail levels, this is 2.5 against 2.9 times zoom. Optical both at the maximum optical zoom range. You can see not much of a difference. I can even go to the 2.9 times, so it's a slight crop on the 2.5 times on the 5 Mark IV, and compare it with the 2.9 times on the 5 Mark II. And yeah, maybe a slightly bit more details on the 5 Mark II, but this is also negligible, and you have to have them side by side, otherwise it's not a day and night difference here in terms of sharpness. So I would say yes, the 5 Mark IV's zoom lens is an upgrade to the 5 Mark II's, even though the reach is not as far, but the color accuracy is definitely better. And let's check this out here, for example. Yeah, maybe a little bit more detail on the 5 Mark II, but this is like really not a big thing. Then auto mode with the main camera. Again, the auto mode is basically the same. We have a bit more punchy colors on the 5 Mark IV and a little bit less punchy colors, especially in the greens, as you can see here, and a bit of more sharpening applied, but I think in general also the lens is a bit sharper. And in terms of detail level, you can see, yes, almost the same, no difference there at all. So you can get a lot of shots where you don't see much of a difference, but a bit more punch in the colors. Another zoom shots, 2.9 times zoom, both not doing a very well thing, but you can see the processing here on the 5 Mark IV, how it's processing, how it's adding a little bit more of contrast into the shot, which makes, yeah, kind of, it looks a bit better on the 5 Mark IV than on the 5 Mark II, which also always looks like there's a kind of bluish haze or mist going on, which I don't like so much. Let's take a look at the darker shots on first glance. Yeah, we know Sony doesn't have like a manual dark mode or night mode, but it has an automatic one. On first glance, nothing much has changed, but take a look at the exposure here, and here it's completely dark. So yes, it is a bit better on the 5 Mark IV. It's getting a bit brighter, but especially when you zoom in, you can see it's a lot sharper. The processing was much better, where here it's a bit blurry on the 5 Mark II. And yeah, taking super low light shots, yeah, Sony is not very used to this, or it's not very known for making daylight out of nighttime. You can see a little bit of the screwdriver here, and basically the same, but what we can see here is the same settings. We have a little bit of the ruler that we can see here. So yes, the 5 Mark IV uses an upgraded sensor that really gives a little bit of more information here out of this. Otherwise, yeah, that's it. We saw already the selfies here, and I want to close up with this. Yes, the 5 Mark IV is an upgrade to the 5 Mark II. It feels like more like a 1 generation upgrade, not like this 2 generation like the number would indicate. And I hope that Sony for the 5 Mark V would do a greater aggressive update in terms of detail levels, megapixels eventually, and HDR. So what do you think about those two devices here? The Xperia 5 Mark IV being the newer device, is it clearly beating the Xperia 5 Mark II, which is the older device? It's a bit hard to tell. One thing that I did not show in the videos is, of course, the 5 Mark IV is better in slow motion. 4K 120 frames per second is what it's capable of. Then of course we have maybe a bit of slightly changes in the sensors. Even though the sensor size stayed the same, we have a bit of better HDR on the 5 Mark IV for sure, and on the 5 Mark II a little bit of worse HDR, though we have a bit of more reach with the telezoom lens. The 5 Mark IV's telezoom lens, which is a little bit worse there, I think still can keep up with the native zoom range of 2.9 times, roughly 3 times zoom on the 5 Mark II. But what do you think? Write it down in the comment section. That's everything for this short little video. Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching. Until the next time. Bye.